Good morning, everybody. It's Marty the JavaScript Party and my buddy Rat, and she's eagerly awaiting her nut. So here you go, baby. There you go. And it is 8:31. So good news, guys. It's gonna be a really short. Guys and gals, 10% of the people who watch this are ladies. So I definitely appreciate you, and I definitely appreciate the dudes too, just as much. Um, So, anyways, yeah. So we are working on this. We're on a journey. I have completely grown on this project, and I was trying to figure out why. And I think the reason why is because 3J. Okay, so there's kind of the very, very best thing about 3JS is it's effing awesome. It is amazing. The stuff that you can make in 3JS, the tools, things that you can do are amazing. The thing I don't like, the worst thing about uh, 3JS is like literally every single thing is an edge case. And an edge case is something that's just slightly different. And like everything is slightly different. Anything you're trying to do, anytime you're trying to do anything, you're slightly different. There's some sort of difference in it. And the differences are so subtle that it's easy to not realize that they're there, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is how I do this, and then the next thing you try to do is slightly different, so then you do it a little bit different, and then next thing you know, you have no idea how anything works. So I have built out like sort of areas, and in my brain, I think because of this and other experiences in my life, like working on back end stuff and things like that, I've sort of changed sort of a big way of coding that I did, because I've always been like a front end Java scripting developer, and now and even when I wasn't a scripting developer, like when I just did basic, like for my and Visual Basic and things like that for my like college senior design, and like when I was just messing around as a little kid, stuff like that. I always did like scripting code, and so you never really nothing was ever like you never really visualize things in sort of spatial from a spatial perspective. But this and other things in my life have sort of moved me in a direction where I realized, oh my gosh, I need to visualize things from a spatial perspective. And then I realized that's exactly what they teach computer science majors. They teach them to visualize everything, not directly. They don't say, hey, we're going to work on visualizing things spatially. That's just how they come at the problems. Now, the thing about visualizing things spatially is that um, the code is much prettier, and it's easier to reason about and talk about and like understand concepts and things like that. The downside is it usually doesn't work. It can't on its own. You cannot build code that actually works with just that skill. Um, so what I have always grown up doing and always done is did like sort of what I call like sort of detective work. I got to come up with a better way, a better word, but like I sort of figure out where the problem starts, and then I start to work backwards till I find the problem. So I have several projects that I'm working on right now, and this is the only project that I set apart that I really contemplate from a visual perspective. And now that I look at my other projects, they look kind of weird and sloppy. And so now I'm kind of understanding what like computer scientists see. I'm an engineering major. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and I was only 4 classes away from a degree in mechanical engineering. So like I'm just like a hardcore engineer. My dad was an electrical engineer who could code, and uh, and so I was just kind of like I come at it like, okay, what's the problem? Let's sort of troubleshoot the problem and figure out what we need to fix, and not really thinking about like the overall structure of how everything works. And now in this project, I have done that. So we have this ST section, and this is the section that sort of so basically the problem with 3JS is it's all from end to end. It's just a bunch of edge cases. So all the edge case management is in this three thing. So this three section of code is the only thing that ever talks to or reads from 3JS. And basically um, any little uh, edge case sort of logic goes in here. But ST is my attempt to build a ThreeJS interface that has no edge cases, that everything works extremely consistently and in the consistency way that I want it to work. So like specifically, one of the things that I want my code to work is to always know what something is looking at. ThreeJS always knows uh, what a spotlight is looking at, but it doesn't have any idea what a camera is looking at. If the camera moves or the world, something in the world that you've built, the scene that you've built moves, then the camera doesn't know what it's looking at. It doesn't keep track of that. But the spotlight has that built into it, right? So I want my camera to work like my spotlight. So that's where so in ST, it assumes that everything works like the spotlight, and it tells ThreeJS to it interacts with ThreeJS. So whenever I add the code, at some point I'm gonna have to figure out, okay, how do I make that happen? Because the way I made that happen in my last effort at this was I updated ThreeJS constantly with the new look at. So every 60 times a second, every time the screen would redraw, it would actually update whatever the camera was looking at. Um, and so that's how I made that work, and there was no problems with that. It seemed to be fine. I was a little worried that there'd be a lot of processing. That's not too bad at all, because I don't really know what's happening behind ThreeJS. So it could be, depending on how they set that up, it could have been very, very expensive, but it wasn't. But anyway, so now I have created a publisher for my ST. And really, the concept, the desire to create a publisher came from saying, hey, ThreeJS needs to have a publisher that tells what it is. But so I have this publisher, and we kind of went through that journey of, okay, we're going to create a publisher. It's going to publish stuff. Oh, wait, it needs to publish stuff in objects. We want to break up all the individual things that it's publishing, so not everything is acting every time, because that's the way Signals works. Signals has a way of working in that if you create an effect, everything in the effect runs. And so if there's 1,000 properties, I don't want every effect to run every time any individual property changes. I want to be able to ask for a specific property and find out if it changes. It's definitely a pick your poison kind of thing. Like, just both of them, you can make really good arguments on why they're bad, and you just have to pick one, which one is less bad for your specific use case. And for my specific use case, I think it's less bad to do that. But so we created a system for showing the calculated aspect ratio. So to understand the calculated aspect ratio, what you have to do is you have to add this. So the aspect ratio in this is defined in the ST. Like if we were to, in the object that is our object, the object that we use that is not, the idea is that it won't have edges, that everything will work consistently all the time. On our side, we defined a ratio, an aspect ratio. I could go in and show you that, but we're already down weird words. We're talking weird concepts and stuff like that, and so let's just take my word for it that it is predefined that right now, because in this view, this grid view, which I think I call a custom view, in this view, this thing should always be shown in the defined aspect ratio. Okay, so the things I'm talking about right now, I did not understand a week ago. Now I understand it. This should be defined in the ratio this should be displayed in the way we defined it. So right now we've defined it as 200 by 200 with an aspect ratio of 1. Because 200 divided by 200, the width divided by the height is 1. If we go into this next mode, which is our tabular mode, which is our sort of our entrance point into editing or updating, still, we want to show this as it's intended, as it's defined, as it's configured. That's how we want to show this. But now once we click into here, into update mode, I don't care how it was defined. We're just trying to work on individual, looking at one thing as it would be displayed naturally, like the natural display. So if you notice on this visualization is wider than it is taller. So if you divide the width by the height, it's 1.5. So that is the calculated one. This is not the one we defined. This is the one we calculated for special cases when we are just doing some sort of editing or updating or something like that. So this is, I'm showing it you the way we want it, and I guess this is, so this is called custom. So like, let's say I had 5 visualizations. I want to be able to just put them wherever I want. I want to be able to customize exactly how they lay out. This always shows it to you in a vertical uh, layout, and it gives you the option of deleting and all that, so you can see what you're working on and all that. And then this is for editing specific visualizations. So there's only one mesh in here, a visualization. The intention is that there could be 15 meshes in here or whatever, and that we could use them. And I would like to be able to reuse meshes. I would like to be able to reuse lights. I would like to be able to reuse everything. So that is why we have so much complexity, and that's why this is moving so slowly, and that's why we needed some sort of interface that sort of softens the edge cases, that sort of doesn't have edge cases, so I can communicate to my system exactly how I want it to look, and then over here in 3 it figures out the edge cases. But I will want to know what it actually is. So this is our publisher for ST, and it's going to tell you what ST calculated. But I can also imagine the situation where I want to know what 3 actually used. So 3 knows what it used in this camera services. So this is a pretty good indicator that there's a problem in my code, right? I can look at the code and I can see that if you look in 3, the work that's being done is in camera, but if you look in ST, the work is being done in renderer. So I think that that is a pretty good indicator that something is off. And honestly, like, this is a really good argument for that spatial coding style, right? Where, because the thing is like, if we were working in detective style, in troubleshooting style, this wouldn't even be, this is so obviously flawed, but you wouldn't be able to tell that flaw. And the reason, probably the only reason it happened, is because I didn't work spatially, because I worked from a troubleshooting thing. And so then the question is, okay, who's right? Is ST right? Is the aspect ratio, is that something that we would calculate in the renderer, or is 3 right? Is that something we would calculate in the camera? Well, I think 3 is more likely to be right than ST, right? Because 3 is the one that actually talks to ThreeJS. So ST is probably wrong. Not 100%, but I'm leaning towards ST. So then let's look in here and just think out loud, right? So we look in camera service and, like, is this wrong? That's what we're asking, right? Is this wrong? So these are new sort of techniques and stuff that I've literally just sort of stumbled upon in the last couple of weeks, or last couple of days. So when we set our aspect ratio, we take the camera and we update it. And see, this is what I would call an edge case. Right after you update the camera, you have to update the camera's projection matrix. You do not do that with a spotlight. A spotlight just automatically does everything. So you don't have to update the aspect. You don't have to update things in the spotlight. It just updates automatically, and you surely don't have to run some extra function that does things for you. I mean, this, and maybe what I just said sounds critical. I don't know. It's hard to know exactly how people are going to receive things, but I'm pretty sure how I said things won't be received the way I meant it. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying that it's different. So we kind of have 2 things that kind of like are sore thumbs, that just really like obvious things that need to be updated. And one thing is we need to refactor so that the camera is what publishes, what does the calculations. Not necessarily publishes, but does the calculations. And then we need to um, update. We need to add a publisher, and then like maybe a third thing, like should the renderer even be involved? And it probably needs to, and it probably would make sense, right? Like, yeah. So in and see that's another funny thing is like you can only have one camera per scene, and one camera can only be, not per scene per renderer. A camera has to be. I don't think you can reuse a camera. I think maybe you can. I'm not sure. That actually that will be interesting. Can I reuse? Can I take this three camera and reuse it, or can I take that camera, or do I have to like where do can I reuse a ThreeJS camera in multiple renderers? Um, I know you can only have one renderer per view. That's because you can only have because a renderer is tied specifically to a DOM element. So if I was looking at two things right now, one renderer has one DOM element. There's nothing I can do. I have to redraw. And so if I want like to emulate having the same renderer, I have to I would have to handle that on the ST side because ThreeJS doesn't do that. Um, but I don't know if you can only have one camera per renderer. If I could reuse ThreeJS's cameras, or if I have to create another camera and then just keep them synced up on the ST side. I don't know which one of those things are the truth. Um, and so I don't know if it makes sense to make the changes on a camera via the renderer. And actually, it does make sense to do it via the renderer because the renderer is the only one that could know. I don't want the camera knowing anything about the. On the ST side, I don't want the camera to even have the vaguest idea about the element. I want to keep the DOM element, so I want to keep those separate. So I think it absolutely makes sense to go through the renderer, but I think actually doing the calculation on the renderer the or in the camera is what makes sense. So what do I want to work on next? Do I want to refactor so that this is in the so that this logic ends up in the camera, or the logic that determines the aspect ratio is in the camera, or do I want to um, create the publisher for three? Now, which one? And I guess my question is because it doesn't matter which order we do them in. So once I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter which order we do them in. I need to do both. I'm likely to forget it if I don't. Which one am I more likely to forget? I think the one I'm more likely to forget is the refactor. I think the publish is like so obvious. Like there's just no way we can move forward um, without the publish. And I did set up this little note for my set up three published that will publish the actual value used. So I would say three aspect ratio is so. And then I would want this to be um, defined aspect ratio is, and that would be the one that comes in. So I think that is a way to move forward in such a way that um, everything's gonna be very reasonable in the future. But um, the other thing that's a bit frustrating and would really frustrate, like if I was working for somebody and all that, is that all of this code here is all throwaway code because this is going to be its own component. So there's that. So as we do so right now, like we're talking all spatial, all theoretical, all things that should work a certain way. But but then once we actually start working in it and things get real, it may not work the way we're imagining right now. And that is a very difficult thing. And that's probably why PRs drive me crazy because most of the people who are reading PRs, a lot of times, in a lot of organization, not the current organization I'm working in right now, but in previous organizations, there are some people that are developers, but they aren't actually very good at actual development, but they're pretty good at like reading code and understanding code and um, and having opinions about the code. They're pretty good at that, but they're not actually very good at actually developing code. There's just a lot of people. It's like there's editors that read other creators' words, like for a book or something, or for a newspaper article, and then they can fix it and have changes done. And then there's people that can write actual code, and that, like, I think in newspapers, it used to be, I don't know if it's, or anytime I've ever seen it on TV and stuff, usually someone spends 10 years as a author writing stuff and making stories or making articles, and then after like 10 years and they've been doing it and they've kind of demonstrated they're really good at it, they get moved up to editor. That's not how it works in code. It's probably how it should work in code, but in code what happens is somebody is typically friends with or related to somebody. They show a knack for understanding how code works and all that, and they can explain the code, and then they get put into a coding area, and then they find that they're most comfortable, like, doing PR reviews and stuff like that. But they never ever get very good at actually developing code. It's a different skill, and so that has always been very frustrating for me because, but the thing is they typically understand this kind of stuff, and it would make a lot of sense to say, dude, shouldn't this logic here, like here, where is it? Do I have it in there? Get 3 camera. This render calculated. Okay, so update aspect ratio for aspect by ID for width and height. Like, well, the fact that this is so long is also probably a pretty good telltale sign. And I literally have just thought of this now, that this is not in the right place. It probably shouldn't need to be that long, and that's because there's from this name you can tell that, one, it updates the aspect ratio. So that's one task this thing does. It finds the ID, and then it does the calculation. Like, it's doing all three of those things. It probably should not do all three of those things. And it's this part, for width and height. Like, oh, it's determining what the width is and the height is. So, this function is just doing way too much. And a lot of it is because it's in the wrong place. Some of this is in the wrong place. And I think the part that's in the wrong place is, let's see, the set calculated. So this is what publishes. So it probably would make sense to pull this into a function in this renderer that does that. And the minute I say that, I immediately, a little alarm goes off in my head, and it's just like, okay, well, how big is this service? And because I don't really want this service to be more than like 1,000 lines. So it is only 142 lines, so it makes sense to bring this publishing into its own to handle this publishing in the service. Eventually, this publishing will probably may very well, since it's for the renderer, we're going to probably have to break this out into some other service that maybe just handles aspect ratios, or maybe just handles rendering, publishing, or something like that. But we can't really, there's not enough. We don't have enough variation at this point to make it worth doing. So I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to say publish calculated aspect ratio. And I'm going to return, and this thing is a Boolean. I'm going to return true. I'm just going to automatically return true. I'll probably return the public. And I guess, yeah, so I should take an aspect ratio. I know that. I know I need the ID, actually. I know it's the ST renderer ID. and I know that that's a number, and I know that I need the aspect ratio, and I know that that's a number, and I'm just going to return true for now. I might return like the aspect ratio, or maybe the, I don't know, maybe the whole thing. I'm not sure, but basically, boom, and then when I, and then basically all it's going to do is this. Yeah, that's all it's going to do. It doesn't actually even know anything about the dictionary, which is a good thing, right? So that is a one-liner. So then I should be able to comment. I should be able to comment this out, and then just call this dot publish calculated aspect ratio, st render id aspect ratio, and then just make sure everything works. I think this actually belongs up here though, in render by ID, like probably right there instead of in here. But I don't want to publish it until this is done, so I don't know. Maybe it belongs here. But and like literally all we did was um, move this exact logic over, but we did make this a lot easier to unit test, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think we made it. I find that to be fascinating that it doesn't come up. Update. And really, I guess that will probably be the easiest way to do that, would be to figure out, like, whenever you add a new one, something lessening, and then it just redraws. But yeah, so that's still working. So we moved this code into here. Um, but really at the beginning, what we really wanted to do was calculate the aspect ratio. And I don't even know where we calculate this aspect ratio. So this has the width and height. Where does it actually? Oh, here. Move this code into the camera, into st camera, so I don't forget it tomorrow. So we want to move this logic into st camera, and be like get new aspect ratio, and then pass in the width, the height, and the height, and that's it. We don't even need to know the ID. It doesn't care. It just it's the one who determines how. So if we ever have some sort of weird edge case and all that, that edge case will be handled probably in the ST. If it's a edge case on my side, on our side, it'll be handled in the ST side. If it's an edge case that's ThreeJS, something that's interesting or unusual about ThreeJS, or unexpected is probably a better word, in ThreeJS, then we'll do it on that side. Anyways, it is 9 o'clock, so I got to go. Bye.